Stio thought something serious was happening, but it turned out the girl just wanted him to try. The magic orb resting in her palm. According to her flowery sales pitch, it was a state-of-the-art treasure, which she had risked life and limb to obtain. It was a magic orb with the extraordinary ability to understand the emotions, hidden deep within the hearts of others. Such an ability, to ordinary people, would seem like a miraculous gift, immense and boundless. But to Stio, it was nothing more than a useless trinket, because, since birth, he had possessed this special ability. I don't need this. Stio bluntly refused. Why'd he do that? Because no one wants to see the dark secrets hidden in the hearts of others. The ability to read people's minds, unearth their memories, or perceive their deepest feelings is the most useless ability in the world. Stio replied and walked out the door. The shopkeeper stood rooted to the spot, her face still blank with confusion. She felt that although this young man possessed handsome features, there seemed to be something peculiar, something different about him. He spoke as if he could read her mind. How strange. Stio returned as Znais was completing the final steps to officially become a member of the guild. While awaiting a decision from his superiors about where he would be assigned, he busied himself with menial tasks like tending the garden, cleaning the house. A few days later, Huck brought surprising good news. Stio had been assigned to the Special Support Division, and his first mission had arrived. After he officially joined the guild, his client was Serafina Z. Fabian, the 10-year-old only daughter of the prestigious Fabian family. The problem she was facing seemed to be related to her pet dog, Hiru, a stubborn and disobedient dog. And Serafina hoped Stio could help her turn Hiru into a well-behaved, obedient dog. Stio's mood was a tangled mess of emotions, difficult to describe. After officially becoming a member of Ignis, he had imagined himself being entrusted with missions of grand scale and epic proportions. Never did he expect his first assignment to be dog training. However, Hake believed this to be a perfectly suitable task because Stio's special ability didn't require rigorous training or extensive combat experience. Moreover, their clientele consisted primarily of prestigious nobles, members of high society. Therefore, he could easily complete the task without expending too much effort and still leave them feeling satisfied and content. Just bring Swaigaway there and everything will be fine. Seeing Stio sigh deeply, his face filled with worry, Hake employed his entire vocabulary to exaggerate and amplify the severity of the situation. It sounds simple, but in reality, it's not that easy. The crux of the matter lies in meeting the meticulous and demanding requirements of the nobles. If you happen to offend them, besides having your order canceled, your future could be ruined, buried in darkness. So, be very careful. He didn't forget to warn Esther to never underestimate Serafina, even if she's just a newborn. Once someone carries noble blood, even a 2-month-old is still a true noble, and you must dedicate yourself to serving her with all your abilities. Well then, good luck. I hope Stio's commission will be a complete success. Training a well-behaved puppy. The black butler brought over a tray of sweets. Stio skillfully popped one in his mouth, then led Niju to the Fabian family mansion. He saw the old woman guarding the gate. After carefully examining Stio's commission letter, quickly led him inside. The interior of the mansion was even more extravagant, but the only thing that caught Stio's attention was the frustrated, angry barking of a small dog somewhere in the building. He moved a little closer. He seemed to understand Hiru's simmering resentment, sharing in the large dog's frustration. Here we go again. Go away, you filthy human. Hiru growled. Don't be like that, Hiru. He's our guest. A beautiful, angelic blonde girl suddenly ran out of the house. Judging by her age, this must be Miss Saraline, Stio thought to himself. Watching Saraline speak and act so gently with Hiru, Stio could easily see the girl's immense love for animals. But unfortunately, Hiru wasn't exactly an obedient dog. Stio introduced himself as a member of Wixis. A look of suspicion immediately appeared on Saraline's small face. I thought the person coming would be a grumpy old man. So, the pretty boy actually works for Wixis? How old are you? This kid has a sharp tongue, Stio thought to himself. Stio felt a flicker of annoyance. But still, the customer was always right. He swallowed his irritation and calmly answered her question. I just turned 19. In the midst of the ongoing conversation, Hiru, from behind, continued to bark incessantly. Hiru's loud barks began to irritate Najura, standing behind Stio. Nejura suddenly shot a sharp, menacing glare at Hiru. The small dog immediately fell silent. Just then, young Lady Sarah Lynn noticed Nejura's presence, but instead of being frightened by the enormous creature, she seemed quite delighted. "Oh my, that gorilla is so big and adorable," she exclaimed. Nejura immediately retracted his fierce expression, replacing it with sparkling, almost fawning eyes as he looked at Sarah Lynn. Young Lady Sarah Lynn was completely charmed. She started to run towards Nejura, but was stopped by a servant. The reason was simple. Nejura was a white-furred ape. They couldn't allow their young lady to come into contact with any potential danger. After a brief sulk for not getting head scratches, Nezura finally calmed down. Sarah decided to return to the main topic. "I hear you have the ability to understand animals' feelings," she said, "so please find out why. My Hiru is always so hostile towards everyone." Miss Sarah's anxious expression made Estio feel he couldn't delay any longer. The young man immediately took action. "First, please have Nezura step back a bit," Estio requested, because Hiru is absolutely terrified. Only Estio and Hiru faced each other in the tense atmosphere. To gain the small dog's trust, Estio removed his gloves and slowly extended his hand towards Hiru. "Hiru, I won't hurt you," he whispered softly. Sarah's worry was evident. Normally, no one dared to approach Hiru for fear of being bitten, but something miraculous happened. After a moment of hesitation, Hiru came closer and nuzzled Estio's hand affectionately. Estio's ability was amplified after this contact. Estio instantly delved into Hiru's deep inner world. It turned out that Hiru carried a childhood filled with misery and humiliation. From the moment it was born, it witnessed a heartbreaking scene, its mother being brutally dragged away by humans, discarded mercilessly like a lifeless object. Because small dogs like Hiru were highly favored by the nobility, its mother was forced to breed continuously, exhausting both her body and spirit. After losing its mother, Hiru wasn't properly cared for and was constantly underfed. It was only given enough food to survive each day to avoid starvation. In order to maintain its small size, catering to the preferences of the aristocracy. Not long after, Hiru caught the eye of Viscount Fabian, Sarah's father. Upon seeing Hiru, the merchants quickly took the small, starving dog to be washed and refurbished. Poor Hiru became the perfect birthday gift for the little lady. But for Hiru, that moment was the last straw, causing its hatred for humans to reach its peak. Because they took its mother's life, plunging it into a constant abyss of sorrow. Sarah showered Hiru with affection, and the little girl did everything she could to love and care for the puppy. However, Hiru never seemed to find true joy in her company. One day, while playing together, things took a turn for the worse. Sarah was suddenly bitten hard on the hand by Hiru. Witnessing this, the butler, Fabian, immediately kicked Hiru. He couldn't tolerate a dog biting its owner, and immediately wanted to get rid of Hiru from the mansion. Sarah cried inconsolably, begging her father to forgive Hiru. She couldn't bear to be separated from her new friend, whom she loved dearly. So, she pleaded with Fabian to take her plea to Ignis. After hearing the whole story, Stio could only sigh in exasperation. Sarah anxiously asked, "Well, is Hiru all right? What's wrong with him?" All of Hiru's fear stemmed from the overwhelming love the little girl had for it. Though just a small puppy, Hiru was like a vulnerable child, and since the day it was born, it had never once felt the warmth of love. Stio began to recount all the hardships it had endured from the moment it was born. These heartbreaking words led Hiru to believe that one day, humans would also take its life, just as they had taken its mother's. Listening to Estio's story, Sherilyn could only clench her teeth, thinking to herself, "Impossible. I cherish Hiru the most. If I had the ability to understand hearts, I would definitely treat them even better." But these innocent, naive thoughts of a young girl were all heard by Sayo. Just understanding the heart is not enough. My mother was killed by humans, and I was also forced to starve to increase my own value. Have you ever thought about how to soothe the terror in my heart? Sherilyn finally couldn't hold back anymore and burst into tears. Although this action made a noble lady like her completely lose her usual grace. Estio completely understood Sherilyn's actions. Despite her noble status, she was still just an innocent child. Moreover, she was a girl with a heart overflowing with love for all animals, especially for Hiru. To resolve this misunderstanding, SDO created a separate mental world for the little dog and guided Sherilyn into it. There, she could communicate with Hiru telepathically. Hiru himself, after this magical encounter, deeply felt the young lady's affection for him. However, he still wished Sherilyn could express her love a little more gently, instead of impulsive actions like lifting him up high and spinning him around. Hiru slowly approached, then gently nuzzled his head against his owner's skirt. Sherilyn carefully bent down, hesitantly reached out, and then gently embraced Hiru. In that moment, the two small souls truly merged as one, understanding each other. And that was the moment SDO successfully completed his task. Saraline burst into tears of joy, sobbing uncontrollably. "Thank you, UI Ignis. This is truly amazing," she exclaimed gratefully. "Although I was the one who requested this, I truly didn't expect this ability to actually exist." Sherilyn embraced Hiru tightly, her happiness evident on her face, impossible to conceal. The young girl continuously blamed herself for not understanding her uncle all this time. "No, you're not wrong. Those who sold Hiru are the ones at fault." SDO comforted her gently. "She just misunderstood your good intentions, because this is completely different from what she has experienced, since Saraline is still young. I also want to offer her a few words of encouragement." Hearing SDO's words, Saraline beamed, a radiant smile blooming on her face. With the commission complete, she handed him his payment, the Sugu. After SDO received the Sugu, Viscount Fabian appeared unexpectedly. "You possess a truly extraordinary ability," he praised sincerely. Sherilyn spotted her beloved father. Overwhelming joy sent her rushing into his warm embrace. From this moment on, little Sherilyn no longer had to worry about Viscount Fabian expelling Hiru from the estate, because he was no longer a traitorous dog. Moments before, Viscount Fabian and young Master Jeremy had arrived back at the mansion just in time. They had been standing outside, witnessing SDO's extraordinary abilities, and so both were incredibly curious about his special talent. "From what I observed, your ability seems to be used to resolve rather peculiar and unusual situations. What exactly is this ability of yours?" "It's the ability to understand the hearts of animals," SDO answered frankly, without any hesitation. Viscount Fabian was silent for about 3 seconds, then abruptly blurted out, "Preposterous." Before SDO could react or explain further, he continued hastily, "You don't know what happens when a commoner, and yet you dare utter such blatant lies before a nobleman of the esteemed Seo family." The air immediately grows thick with tension. "It seems that completing your mission flawlessly has made you careless and overconfident. Do you think nobles like us are so easily fooled? I'm incredibly curious to witness firsthand how you define what constitutes a living being. Is it based on superior intellect or an immortal soul? What about creatures born from the union of humans and monsters?" SDO has always meticulously concealed his ability to perceive hearts and read the thoughts of others by claiming he can listen to the voices of all creatures. But it seems the nobleman before him is far more perceptive and astute than he anticipated. While he probes and scrutinizes SDO inadvertently overhears the nobleman's inner thoughts. "That son of his, Jeremiah, impossible. If he truly possesses the ability to read minds, then he's a true monster." Jeremy's thoughts still truly stung SDO deeply. But even so, ever since he was a child, he had been branded a monster, a cursed being. Now, one more person thinking the same didn't really change much for him. The real issue lay with that nobleman. It seemed the Viscount Fabian, was particularly interested in Estel's unique abilities. Estel, although he only hinted that he would soon send more commissions to Ignis, Estel understood that in the future, he and the Viscount would surely cross paths again. The grand-scale conversation between these adults was beyond Sarolin's understanding. The little girl was just happy to have learned Stio's name before he left. And of course, Saroline expressed her sincere gratitude for his help in resolving her troubles. However, her older brother, young Master Jeremy, was extremely wary of Esther. He didn't even want his sister to have close contact with him. "Is your ability limitless? I can't read everything, so I won't read your thoughts. Please don't worry. Are you sure? Or are you just saying that, and then you'll read everything in my mind?" Jeremy suddenly flew into a rage. He refused to tolerate someone who could read minds in his house for another second. So, he bluntly threw Seo out of the house. Sherilyn was brought to tears by her brother's rude behavior. After all, Seo was the one who helped her make amends with Hiru, and now Jeremy was treating him so poorly, it made her incredibly sad. Estio, leading Najura, returned to the mansion as dusk painted the sky crimson. The word monster, flung by Jeremiah, stuck in Estio's mind like daggers, leaving a persistent ache. Though he tried to brush off the harsh words, to say he wasn't hurt would be a blatant lie. Estio silently gazed at the cheerful coin nestled in his palm. A sudden wave of loneliness and disorientation washing over him, lost in the turbulent sea of his life. Humans truly are complicated creatures, he mused. Najura's voice suddenly broke the silence. Estio looked up in surprise. But before he could ask, Najura quickly spoke. Najura is very happy that Estio can understand her heart. Estio can read Najura's thoughts without Najura having to say a word. Estio understood that Najura was trying to comfort him. Her words were incredibly kind, but they were also the very reason why people feared and shunned his unique ability. Estio's existence was truly different, extraordinary, making him feel lost and alone in the ever-changing world. However, Nazura wasn't afraid of Estio. On the contrary, in its eyes, Estio was kinder and more decent than anyone else. He possessed a kind and warm heart. The true fault didn't lie in Estio's ability, but in the dark and wicked thoughts that people concealed. Nazura said a lot, but everything came from the sincerity of its heart, not from empty words of comfort, meant to appease Estio. Estio stroked the little monkey's head, reassuring it not to worry. Even if someone hates or fears me, even if they see me as a terrifying monster, I won't mind. Because compared to being locked away in a dark attic, being free to walk together like this is what makes me feel the true meaning of life. One person and one monkey continued their journey back to the guild. Estio ignored young Master Jeremy's harsh words, but to continue surviving. Over the next few days, he seemed to have caught the eye of the Lord when he directly sent a commission request to the guild. This made Hack and Rosalie incredibly excited. Actually, with his extraordinary abilities, this was expected, but neither of them could have imagined that his fame would spread so quickly, like wildfire. Contrary to Hack and Rosalie's joy, Stio was immersed in silence because he understood clearly the more attention he received, the more dangers he would face. However, to survive, he had to continue working, and Stio continued to accept support missions. Specifically, this time, the mission was related to the Jefferson Company, the force that holds the largest gemstone trade market share in the city. For some reason, the company suddenly declared bankruptcy, throwing the jewelry industry into chaos. Estio's mission this time was to locate the company's president, Thompson, and investigate the cause of the incident. As usual, after accepting the mission, Estio and Najura prepared to depart. But before leaving, he suddenly realized something. It seemed that every time he went out on a mission, Black would rush after him, just to tell him something like, "Be careful." And today, Rosalie also specifically asked him to, after completing the mission, on his way back, buy her melon bread. It was just a small request, but it made Estio's heart swell with emotion, because it was the first time he felt the warmth of a real family. The first thing Estio did after leaving the guild was to look for a map. But today's destination was quite far. Traveling on foot would take at least an hour. While Estio was racking his brain for a solution, suddenly, Nazura turned her back to him, presenting her rear. "Let Nazura carry you. I'm much faster than you, Estio. Such a long walk would tire you out." Estio never considered Nazura a mere pet, let alone a mount. So he refused. But this unintentionally made Nazura feel dejected, because Nazura felt useless, unable to help Estio in any way. Finally, to avoid disappointing Nazura, Estio reluctantly climbed onto Nazura's back. And indeed, Nazura ran with astonishing speed. The boy and his monkey companion quickly reached their destination. Only now, Estio felt his heart pounding in his chest. "My stomach is doing flips." They stopped in front of a magnificent, imposing mansion. A western-facing window displayed a glass case, filled with glittering, extravagant jewels. In Estio's eyes, they were nothing more than ordinary pebbles with gaudy, dazzling colors. Therefore, the boy found it incredibly perplexing to see everyone going crazy, head over heels for these things. Putting the jewels aside, SDO stepped forward and knocked on the door, just as he knew the company's owner lived in this house. But he knocked for a long time, and no one answered. However, SDO firmly believed that Thompson wouldn't abandon his house and go anywhere, even though the company had closed. So he decided to wait patiently there until he appeared. Despite the biting cold, SDO stubbornly remained rooted in front of the house. He, Inajura, patiently waited until midnight when the temperature dropped to its lowest. Finally saw Thompson appear. "Hey kid, are you out of your mind? I thought this bone-chilling cold would make you give up and go home." Although he was nearly frozen himself when he saw Thompson, SDO looked incredibly excited, because finding this man meant the mission was half complete. However, the moment Thompson saw him, he shooed him away like he was a plague. "Just one look, and I can tell you were sent by those rich nobles, right? I have nothing to sell, so go back." At first, Thompson planned to go back inside immediately after speaking, but when he saw SDO shivering uncontrollably from the cold, he couldn't bring himself to do it. "You look like you're about to collapse. Your limbs are trembling, and your face is pale. Let me just ask, you're not thinking about ending it all, are you? My house has become a hotspot for people looking to end it all. Oh, Thompson." He even cheerfully suggested to me that 2 blocks from here, there's a bridge. People say the river there is nice and warm, so if you're going to kill yourself, do it there instead of on my doorstep. "I have no intention of killing myself." SDO replied weakly. "Don't you? Well, good. Then why are you still sitting in front of someone else's house? Get out of my sight." Thompson lost his patience, roughly pulling SDO to his feet, intending to throw him out. But thanks to this sudden contact, SDO was able to read his memories. This seemingly tough man actually possessed a more fragile heart than one might think. He had a beautiful wife named Tin. Thompson fell in love with her at first sight. So, when Tin accepted his proposal, it was a dream come true. But ironically, the married life Tin longed for was a string of bitter days filled with endless suffering. A long and unending misfortune awaited the young woman. Their firstborn passed away just before his first birthday, then their second child, their third. Tin fell into a cruel cycle of pregnancy and miscarriage, repeating endlessly. Later, Tin gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom they named Lee. Lee's resounding cries at birth carried all of Thompson's hopes. But sadly, by then, Tin had fallen into a deep depression due to prolonged mental stress. She was haunted by the thought that Lee would eventually leave her like her previous children. Therefore, Tin was indifferent to Lee, not even wanting to look at him, even after his first birthday. From then on, their marital relationship began to crack. Thompson even knelt down and begged his wife, but Tin remained cold and indifferent to everything. It was this despair that led Thompson to decide to close his company. He dedicated all his time to devote himself entirely to caring for his beloved daughter. SDO knew he didn't have much time to waste with the man in front of him. Therefore, after grasping Thompson's dilemma, the boy immediately offered his advice. "If your wife doesn't want to talk, then give her some space for now." Thompson looked both surprised and alarmed. He probably couldn't understand how. SDO knew that. However, in the current situation, he could only offer the advice he thought was most reasonable. If someone is deliberately avoiding the truth, then no matter how hard you try to persuade them, they won't listen. Thompson's reaction was much more violent than SDO had imagined. He was roughly grabbed by the collar and thrown back into the house. After slamming the door shut, Thompson revealed a terrifying expression. Just as Thompson predicted, he began to question SDO. "How did you come across this information?" Pain throbbed throughout SDO's body. He tried to compose himself to answer Thompson's question. "I am SDO from..." Thompson brought a hand to his forehead, inwardly cursing the troublesome nobles for digging into his personal life, and even sending a request all the way to Vui to bother him. However, looking at SDO, Thompson didn't sense him as a threat, because the boy looked so frail, as if Ignis had sent their weakest member. Besides, the kid hadn't done anything wrong. Suddenly, Thompson felt a pang of guilt for being rough with such a fragile boy, making him wait for hours in the freezing cold. Outside, those blind fools were. Thompson sighed heavily, his face etched with boredom, his greed for jewels evident. Then, he extended a hand towards SDO. "Please forgive my rudeness earlier. Indeed, I am the head of the renowned Jefferson Corporation. SDO glanced at the outstretched hand, then looked up at the ceiling, lost in thought. Finally, he decided to stand up on his own, ignoring the waiting hand. His hand left hanging in midair. Thompson stammered, a bit embarrassed. Ahem. So this young man from Znai's. What brings you here? I came to ask for help. So you can revive your business. SDO replied bluntly. So that you can revive your failing company. SDO answered without hesitation. What the hell? Thompson exclaimed, as if he had misheard something unbelievable. The young lord is quite hasty. Anyway, this matter can't be resolved in just a few words. Thompson invited him inside. He lit some candles and poured him a drink, hoping to dispel the chill of the night. After selecting a fine wine and taking a few large gulps, Thompson's mood finally calmed down a bit. Honestly, thinking back, Thompson felt that SDO wasn't just unimpressive, but also rather naive and foolish. To complete the mission in this situation, he should have flattered and tried to win him over. However, the only thing SDO had done so far was wear a blank expression. The only thing that piqued Thompson's interest in SDO was when he mentioned his wife. But truthfully, that interest wasn't well-intentioned, because he absolutely hated it when people pried into his personal life. Exposing someone's private matters wasn't a wise move. When touching upon such sensitive topics, one had to be mindful of the situation. I apologize. SDO mumbled, his head bowed low. Frankly, he was too inexperienced and childish. Why would they send someone like you here? He no longer resented Styo, but he was also certain that he would never think about reviving the business. Styo remained silent, unable to even utter a question as to why. This, in turn, made Tom's son suspicious. Aren't you going to ask why? Well, what do you think about not continuing the business anymore? Seeing Tom's son's confusion, Styo finally asked the question mechanically. It was the first time he'd met a member of GUI on a mission who was so naive. Perhaps this was the most comical thing to happen in recent days, making Tom's son temporarily forget the burdens weighing down on his life. Perhaps because of his good mood, he decided to share the reason with Styo, that he loved his wife and little daughter beyond measure. Even if the whole world offered him everything, Thompson would never abandon them for anything. The most pressing issue was Tin's deteriorating condition. It was getting progressively worse. Ever since baby Leah was born, she had completely withdrawn, refusing to leave her room. Thompson had once tried to force Tin out, but it only resulted in extreme behavior, specifically her biting her own tongue. Fortunately, nothing serious happened that time, but a harsh truth had been laid bare before Thompson. His wife would rather die than face their daughter. This left him with no time, nor any energy to care about gems or business anymore. At this point in his story, Thompson broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Styo remained silent, astonishment rising within him, because despite having read Thompson's memories, there were still secrets he hadn't known. Thompson didn't wallow in grief for long. After regaining his composure, he wiped away the tears streaming down his face and forced a weak smile. Anyway, I owe you an apology for causing 7th Boss's mission to fail, but at least for this year, I have no intention of returning to work. So, tell them to find a supplier from other businesses. Thompson patted Styo's shoulder a few times in consolation. But for someone as persistent as Styo, how could he give up so easily? If your wife's health improves, would you reconsider coming back to work? Thompson was about to see his guest out, but his steps faltered upon hearing this question. Perhaps I can help you. After SDO's cryptic words, Thompson quickly turned around. I'll get your wife to leave that room. Looking at SDO, it seemed he wasn't joking, but Thompson still couldn't quite believe him. Even he himself had no way to coax his wife out of the room. So how could an outsider like SDO possibly do the impossible? How do you intend to do that? SDO didn't answer. Instead, he slowly walked towards Thompson, then suddenly reached out and gently touched his forehead with 2 fingers. Thompson was startled, flustered, and quickly brushed SDO's hand away. Just then, an unfamiliar voice suddenly echoed in his mind. Please don't be afraid. I beg you, SDO. I'm not a bad person. There's only Thompson and SDO here. But the mysterious voice wasn't SDO's. Thompson hung his head. He unexpectedly met Nijura's clear, sincere gaze. It startled him, causing him to stumble backward in a panic. The glass in Thompson's hand tilted, spilling its amber liquid. Just now, a strange voice echoed in my mind. Thompson's face paled, his lips trembled. Estio then calmly stepped forward, extending a hand to help him up. Although Thompson didn't understand how Estio had done it, the mysterious phenomenon that had just occurred convinced him that this young man was no ordinary person. Thompson placed his hand in Estio's, accepting his help. Thompson then led Estio and Ajura to his wife's room. When Thompson knocked, Estio could sense his apprehension, his nervousness and caution. Perhaps his wife's condition had caused him immense suffering. "It's me, darling. We have guests today." Thompson was met with a suffocating silence and eerie stillness. Tension coiled tight within him. His grip on the doorknob intensified. The door swung open. CO felt the icy blast of wind, carrying the scent of snow, hit him square in the face. Jean sat silently on a chair by the wide-open window, allowing the biting cold to seep in her thin frame, clad only in a single layer. Just one look at her face, and anyone could easily see that this young woman had completely lost the will to live. Panic rising, Thompson rushed forward to close the window. Jin's hands lay limp on the chair, ice cold, making his heart clench in agony. Her eyes were empty, lifeless, even when Estio approached. She didn't seem to notice or care. Estio gently touched Jin's hair, but strangely, her mind was unusually quiet. Never before had Estio had to adjust his abilities to read someone's memories. Not anyone's, but it seemed this time he had no choice. Just as Estio made his move, the entire room suddenly was shaken by a terrifying surge of dark energy. It was so powerful that even a strong man like Thompson nearly collapsed. Thick black smoke filled the room. In a blink of an eye, transporting Estio, Najura, and Thompson to a completely different space. It was a lush green forest, quiet and peaceful. The three of them looked around cautiously. There didn't seem to be anything unusual there, until a gentle voice spoke. "Phew, it's so hot. Having to work in the fields in this weather. I really want to rest for a bit today." Thompson's eyes widened in astonishment, for the woman before him was his wife. She looked perfectly healthy, a stark contrast to the frail, sickly woman he knew. Not one bit. It seems that Estio had lost control of her abilities, accidentally stumbling into the deepest recesses of Jin's memories. Not only that, but she also dragged Thompson and Najura into the memory realm with her. Jin in the memory appeared ragged and impoverished, but his face still shone with a zest for life, brimming with happiness. Everything matched the fragmented memories Estio had seen in Thompson's mind. In his childhood, Jin was the son of a destitute farming family. His mother passed away when he was too young to remember her face. And when Jin was a little older, his father followed his late wife, leaving this world. Beside young Jin were only two younger siblings in dire need of care and protection. Therefore, he shouldered the responsibility of caring for and raising his siblings from a young age. Jin worked tirelessly at various arduous jobs to make ends meet. Fortunately, both his siblings were well-behaved and understanding. Life, though difficult, was filled with simple joys and happiness. Then one day, Jin fell in love. But the man who captured her heart wasn't Thompson, but another poor farmer boy named Joan. They were deeply in love, intoxicated by their passionate romance. But poverty was a deep, consuming swamp, slowly drowning and crushing all their hopes for happiness. Tin felt unable to care for her three younger siblings, despite working tirelessly, taking on constant overtime. The meager amount she earned wasn't enough for food and medicine. For the poor children, Doan proposed to her. Not just once, but 3 heartfelt times. But Tin steadfastly refused, resolutely rejecting him. Their love was immense and powerful, but the harsh reality was overwhelmingly cruel. Finally, Tin and Doan had to part ways, going their separate directions. She decided to go to the city, hoping to find more job opportunities, more orders. In that bustling metropolis, Tin met Tom's son. That was also the first time I met Tin. Memories of his beloved wife flashed before his eyes, and Tom's son couldn't hold back the surge of emotion. The first time they met, he was collapsed on the street, his body racked with a persistent cough. At that time, Tim was rushing to complete her delivery. But seeing Tom's son in such a critical condition, despite the difficulties, she decided to help him to the infirmary. When Thompson woke up in a daze, the first thing he saw was Tin's beautiful, elegant face. His heart was completely captivated. Not long after, Thompson proposed, and Tin happily accepted. On their way back to their charming little house in the suburbs, John suddenly appeared. And when his eyes landed on the sparkling ruby ring on her finger, John looked devastated, almost frantic. "I heard you're getting married. Is it true?" he asked, his voice trembling. "If you leave me, I'll kill myself right here." It turned out, John wasn't just making empty threats. He proved it, because in that instant, he pulled a bottle of pesticide from his pocket. His goal was still to force Tin to come back to him, but she firmly refused. She longed for a brighter future for herself and her siblings. Perhaps it was her resolute, cold demeanor that Joan made a grave mistake, a foolish act that was hard to forgive. From that fateful moment, Jean lived in constant torment and haunting memories, plagued by the thought that she was cursed by Joan. This was the first time Thompson witnessed the deepest layers of memories, hidden deep within the heart of his beloved wife. Before this moment, he was completely unaware that another man had existed, who loved Jean so deeply and passionately, to such an extent. Because of what he had just witnessed, Thompson became even more devastated and plunged into despair. He believed Jean only married him for his wealth. Perhaps his thoughts were not unfounded. After all, she had rejected a poor farmer to choose the man who could shower her with sparkling jewels, luxury, and extravagance. Stio's words, though soft and gentle, were like sharp knives, piercing straight into Thompson's broken heart. Let's say if that were true, would you reconsider your decision? What do you mean? If your wife's decision was influenced by money and hardship, if she desired the things you possess, then would she still be one of the two most precious women in the world that you confided in me about? Stio's question was incredibly blunt, but Thompson's love for his wife was immense. He didn't even hesitate for a second, but immediately affirmed resolutely that Tin was still the woman he loved the most. She was still Thompson's most precious wife, even though the truth was she was trapped in a vortex of painful memories. Tears began to stream down Thompson's cheeks. He reminisced about the days when Layla was just born, but Kate wouldn't even glance at her, though he tried his best to reason with Kate. The truth was his wife was drowning in grief because she believed each lost child was punishment for her past mistakes. Thompson's heart ached with a mix of sorrow and despair. He and Co had shared the painful memories of Kate's past. Thompson slowly approached his wife, then took a knee before her, just like the day he proposed so many years ago. "Kate, this isn't your fault." Thompson grasped her hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Leah, our daughter, she's alive. She's alive, and she's going to be okay. She's waiting for you. So please, stop blaming yourself. Come back to Co and me." Thompson didn't care about the business. He didn't care about his beloved wife's past, nor did he care if she came to him for love or for money. But deep down, he knew there was no reason for her to torture herself like this. All Thompson wanted was to share every pain with his wife, to overcome everything together, because they were a family, a united whole. Just then, a fierce lightning bolt suddenly struck from the sky, shattering the window beside them in an instant. Instinctively, Thompson quickly embraced his wife, shielding her. He only wanted to protect her, to keep her from harm. And it seemed that Jin's eyes had also found their spark again in that moment. His wife's sudden change surprised Thompson and moved him deeply. Just then, a baby's cry echoed from the next room. Jean sat up, her eyes wide with astonishment as she looked at Thompson. "Leah," she cried, running toward the sound. For the first time in her life, Tin lovingly held her little daughter Leah tight, her small lips constantly whispering apologies for being away from her mother for so long. This unexpected reunion brought immeasurable joy to Thompson. "She's hungry, honey. I knew it just by hearing her cry," Thompson said to his wife. He handed Tin a bottle of formula. "You must be hungry too, right? I made some chicken soup for you back home." Tin, overflowing with joy, embraced her husband and baby daughter. Their family of three, after weathering so many storms, was finally basking in the warmth of togetherness. As for Estio, perhaps because he had used so much energy earlier, his body was completely exhausted. After Thompson and Tin went to the nursery to care for the baby, he couldn't stand any longer and collapsed onto the floor. Estio was Thompson's lifesaver. Of course, he couldn't just leave him like that. So, in the stillness of the night, the couple rushed the boy to to the most renowned apothecary in the region. Estel's body burned with fever, lost in an unconscious delirium. The apothecary, after taking Estel's pulse and a lengthy diagnosis, finally shook his head in dismay. He believed the root of Estel's illness lay in his special abilities, something beyond his ability to cure. Furthermore, no apothecary within this territory could treat ability-related issues. The experienced apothecary believed this situation arose because Estel had never experienced a loss of control over his powers. For now, let the boy rest completely. Then, depending on the situation, seek Gil's help. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson exchanged glances. Mrs. Tim looked at Nazura for a long moment, then turned to her husband. Nazura sat beside the bed, her eyes filled with worry, never leaving Estel's side. Thompson pondered for a long time before speaking, because earlier, Nazura was the one who had burst into the child's room. Quickly, someone tell everyone that Estel has collapsed. This is the first time in Thompson's life that he's seen a talking white monkey. He's still astonished. You said Leah is waiting back home, so we need to head back now. I'll cover all of Estel's medical expenses, don't you worry. If you need anything at all, just come find me. Nazura nodded repeatedly, showing his agreement. But just then, he suddenly remembered a very important matter concerning his visit with Estel. What about the commission request? Thompson looked at his wife and smiled brightly. He had already made up his mind. The request was to reopen the company, correct? Since Staio is my benefactor, I will naturally accept, because my wife's heart has been healed. So you don't need to worry anymore. I'll let this fellow stay here and assist you. Only then was Nazura completely at ease. Thompson and his wife then returned home. Only Niju remained by his bedside, his face etched with worry and anxiety. On the morning of the third day, Estio finally opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Niju's tear-filled eyes, sparkling like stars. Unable to contain his emotions, the small dog jumped onto the bed and quickly embraced him. After confirming his condition was stable, Estio asked the elderly healer for permission to be discharged. After all, being bedridden for 2 days was more than enough. They both returned to the Sioux Guild. The reward for the completed commission request had arrived. It was 5 Sioux coins. Huck's eyes crinkled with delight. He had guided many ability users with his own hands, but this was the first time Huck had witnessed a member achieve such outstanding results like Estio in such a short time after joining the guild. Now Estio was Ignis Golden Boy. His reputation had spread so far that it had reached the ears. The nobles in the neighboring city always. After Estio recovered, another difficult problem arose. He received a second mission from the prestigious Fabian family. This time, Baron Fabian himself sent the request. However, the letter didn't disclose the specific details of the mission. Even so, Estio couldn't refuse. He didn't want to offend the powerful nobility. Therefore, Inajura once again set foot in that grand mansion. Upon entering, Estio was greeted by Hiru, who rushed out excitedly. It seemed the boy had missed Estio dearly after the long separation. Saraline also appeared quickly. With just a glance at the envelope in Estio's hand, she immediately understood why her father had summoned him. It's so good to see you again, Estio. How about you? Estio felt awkward at Saraline's question. He didn't know how to respond for a moment. Not bad. Dissatisfied with this answer, Saraline pounced and pinched his cheek. Isn't it good? So is it good or bad in the end? Are you happy to see me again? Aren't you afraid I can see into people's hearts? Estio didn't answer, but asked in return. Ever since he was mistreated by the young master of the Fabian family, had been carrying a lingering sadness in his heart. Coming here today, Estio felt incredibly apprehensive. However, Saraline was completely different from her brother. The young girl showed no fear, nor did she display any aversion to Estio's ability, because she believed that he wouldn't reveal other people's deepest secrets and expose them to the world, much less control other people's emotions at will. Because in Saraline's eyes, Estio was an incredibly kind person. Their conversation was interrupted by the mansion's butler. The Viscount was eager to meet Estio, though Saraline was disgruntled, but he couldn't disobey his late father's wishes. All right, I understand. But before you leave, you absolutely must come see me again. Don't even think about avoiding me. You hear? Estio obediently nodded, agreeing to her request. Then, under the careful guidance of the butler, he was led to the mansion owner's room. The Viscount was already there, waiting for him. Before Estio could even offer a greeting, the Viscount suddenly posed a question. a question seemingly unrelated to the current situation. Tell me, do you know about cacti? Estio replied. It's amazing how a plant can thrive in the barren desert, a place where even water doesn't exist. Isn't that extraordinary? Being plants, it can't be said they don't need water at all. But if watered like ordinary plants, they would quickly rot. The Viscount launched into a passionate discourse about cacti. Finally, he concluded that if the owner doesn't understand its true value, it's easy for the plant to wither and die. Estio realized that the Viscount wasn't just talking about the cactus. Are you asking if I can read thoughts? The Viscount approached Estio, carefully holding the potted cactus. He had never tried to read a plant's thoughts before, and he'd never even considered that they could have thoughts like animals. However, after focusing his abilities a little more, Estio suddenly heard a loud curse echoing in his mind. Why is this old man so damn chatty? Estio tried to suppress his astonishment. The cactus in the Viscount's hand actually had thoughts, and it was continuously cursing him. And just as Estio predicted, the Viscount's purpose wasn't just to chat about cacti. To Estio, a cactus didn't have the ability to choose, but the decision ultimately rested with him, the choice of a worthy master to serve. Viscount Fabian's intentions were crystal clear. He was trying to recruit Estio to his side, promising him a special position, a noble rank that no one in the mansion would dare to disregard. And all Estio had to do was swear absolute loyalty to him. Moreover, he would enjoy the highest privileges granted to a commoner. Estio guessed that the old man coveted his ability to see into people's hearts, and he was absolutely right. Viscount Fabian didn't even bother to hide his ambition. He ordered Estio to read the minds of those he pointed to. Don't trust him. Those are all lies. Only manipulative and despicable people would utter such words. Before Estio could even protest, he heard a furious roar erupt from the staff in Viscount Fabian's hand. He himself had never intended to accept this vile offer, although he had no desire to provoke the nobility. It seemed the Viscount's intentions were far from benevolent. I'm deeply grateful for your generous offer, but I'm quite content with my current employment, Estio replied. His response triggered a booming laugh from the old man. Ha ha ha. It seems you've misunderstood something, young man. This isn't an offer. It's a command. His demeanor changed as quickly as turning a page. This was definitely not a good person. Estio tried to remain calm. He calmly asked the Viscount, what would happen if I were to refuse your command? Perhaps nothing immediately, but misfortune would surely befall you. It was a blatant threat. Estio was just a 19-year-old commoner. How could he not tremble before the threat of a powerful and experienced nobleman? However, he maintained his composure until the very end. Estio tilted his head respectfully and told the Viscount that, if he wanted him to change jobs, he needed to discuss it with Gil first. Estio's firm and unwavering stance unexpectedly pleased the Viscount, because if he had readily agreed, it would have shown that he wasn't trustworthy and not worthy of his respect or employment. The Viscount retracted his threatening demeanor and said he would give Estio more time to consider, to see where he truly belonged. He then handed the cactus to the butler and ordered him to dispose of it immediately. Get rid of this thing. I'll replace this fussy plant with a more beautiful flower. Estio could hear the cactus screaming in despair. You? How dare you touch me? You bastard! Are you going to throw me away? You bastard! Let me go! You filthy human! Butler Shun, take Estio out of here immediately. As he was led away, the boy kept hearing desperate cries coming from the poor tree. Witnessing this, Estio bravely asked if he could take it with him. They were going to throw it away anyway. This tree not only doesn't bear flowers, but its branches are also covered in thorns, and it's very difficult to care for. Do you really want to take it? How can you be sure it will never bloom? Seeing Estio's determination, the butler handed the tree over to him. He then told Estio to stay at the mansion for a while, because Lady Serafina wanted to see him. After the butler left, the tree in Estio's hands kept mumbling. It seemed to be very scared, worried that he would abandon it too. Seeing this, Estio comforted it. I won't hurt you. I won't burn or throw you away. However, this is the first time I've met a cactus, so I'm not sure what the best conditions are for you. If you feel thirsty, please let me know. The cactus in Estio's hand suddenly fell silent, because I can hear your thoughts. Feel free to speak up if you're uncomfortable. Only a frightening silence, answered Estio. It seemed the small cactus in his hand was in deep shock, realizing a human could understand its thoughts. A moment later, it stammered in astonishment. Whoa, are you a god? How can you hear me? Estio decided to name the cactus Ahuru because its self-proclaimed name, Nijura, was so long it could be called as long as your great-grandmother's tail. Nijura had seen Estio muttering to himself, and she understood he was talking to the cactus in his hand. So, Nijura couldn't contain her excitement and clapped her hands enthusiastically. Can Estio talk to plants now, too? That's amazing. It was just a simple compliment. But Nijura's awestruck expression filled Estel with immense joy, as if he had just accomplished some great feat. Estel then introduced Ahuru to Nijura. The two small creatures seemed to hit it off instantly, despite being of different species and unable to understand each other's language. Ahuru also seemed to be quite fond of Estel. Even the sharp thorns on its body seemed to soften when they came into contact with the boy. While I still can't move my body freely, I can control these thorns without hurting Estel. You can't move freely? Estel asked, puzzled. That's right, didn't you know? If we live long enough or accumulate enough power, we cacti can move as we please. Although I'm still young, thanks to my strong will, I can control my thorns. Stio absorbed all this strange, arcane knowledge completely. He really wanted to have a deeper conversation with Ahuru while waiting for Seraphina to arrive. But unfortunately, another problem suddenly arose. Young Master Jeremy, with a scowl even deeper than before, had found him. I told you to get out of here and never show your face in front of me again, didn't I? Is your memory that poor? Or do you dare take my words as a joke? You lowly commoner. Compared to their previous encounter, Jeremy's words this time were even more venomous and harsh. He continuously insulted and demeaned Stio, calling him a lowly commoner, and pointing at Nizura, calling him a hideous, ugly monster. However, he wanted to buy Nizura for a ridiculously absurd reason, because it's a monster that can speak human language. He also mocked Stio for mumbling to himself, as if he were talking to a tree. Jeremy's insolent behavior infuriated Ahuru. Another imbecile with well-developed limbs, but an underdeveloped brain? Nezuko is not an object. Jerome's arrogance infuriated Stio, but the arrogant jerk remained stubbornly defiant. What keen observation. Since you can read my mind, this negotiation is over, isn't it? Take it, he said, pulling out 10 gold coins. But Stio firmly repeated his previous statement, that Nezuko was not a commodity to be bought or sold. Jeremiah thought he was trying to haggle for more money, but Stio simply stated firmly that he would absolutely never sell Nezuko. Stio's defiance made him livid. Jeremiah felt incredibly irritated that a lowly peasant like Stio would dare to disrespect a noble like him. Look, I've been holding back from punching your lights out, and yet you dare ignore my warning and evade me. What the hell are you doing lurking around my property? Estio tried to explain, insisting he was only there at the invitation of Viscount Fabian. But of course, Jeremy didn't believe him. He aggressively lunged forward, grabbing Estio by the collar. Compared to a nobleman's son, trained in swordsmanship from a young age, a frail, skinny boy like Estio was no match. Just as Jeremy was about to punch Estio in the face, Niju couldn't hold back any longer and yelled, "Don't bully Estio." Jeremian was stunned and released Estio. He knew the white-furred monkey could understand human speech, but he didn't expect it to speak so fluently. Greed surged within him. Jeremian declared he would pay Estio 30 gold coins to buy Niju. But this time, he gave him no chance to refuse. Instead, Jeremian ordered the nearby guard knights to seize Niju and take him to the breeding grounds. I said clearly, I'm not selling. Estel roared furiously, his voice echoing many times louder than Jeremian's shout. He was so angry that his whole body trembled, because for the first time since he was born, he had been yelled at by a commoner. Theo was surrounded by 4 Fabian knights, who were about to forcefully seize Nijura, but they had no idea they were playing with death. Estio could tolerate it, but Nijura couldn't endure it any longer. Finally it struck first. The ape's sharp claws flashed, instantly crippling a knight's arm. Only screams of horror remained in the hall, and the remaining knights recoiled in terror. Jeremy's fury intensified. Just then, more soldiers arrived. He pointed directly at Theo and ordered them to arrest him. He's framing me, accusing me of trying to kill him. Estio's heart was glacial, and so was Nezura's. A chilling coldness resided in both of them. Jeremy branded it a terrifying monster, but his actions were more savage and cruel than any monster, obeying the young master's command. The knights immediately cast a massive net, ensnaring Nezura's entire body. Immediately after, they drew their swords and launched a relentless attack. The knights' barbaric laughter, coupled with their brutal actions, drove Nezura completely mad. Despite having followed Estio for some time and willingly wearing chains, the beast's wild instincts remained intact. Jeremian recoiled in terror at Nezura's ferocious roar, stumbling back in fear. And at that moment, the Viscount was awakened by the chaotic noise. He immediately came downstairs to investigate. "What's going on, Jeremian?" Upon seeing his father, Jeremian was overjoyed as if he had struck gold. Before he could even utter a word of complaint, Viscount stormed towards him like a whirlwind, grabbing him by the shoulders and unleashing a torrent of verbal abuse. "You idiot! That should have been in my grasp. But that insignificant nobody interfered and ruined everything." "What do you mean, father?" Jeremian was completely bewildered. Not only had he been brutally scolded by his father, but he was being reprimanded because of a lowly commoner. "Shut up, you imbecile." Viscount, exasperated, shoved his son aside like discarded trash, then ordered his knights to clean up the battlefield.